Greetings and welcome. This is the Cancer Interviews podcast, and I'm your host, Bruce Morton. Our guest on this episode was diagnosed with melanoma, and though it wasn't detected early, she rallied and survived. She is Naniki Seboni of Johannesburg, South Africa, and we're going to hear her story. So here she is, and Naniki, welcome to Cancer Interviews.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Bruce, for that wonderful introduction. I'm so glad to be here.
And we're glad to have you with us, and we look forward to hearing your story. But before we get to that, it's always our custom, Naniki, to, as we start out, to learn a little bit more about our guest, exclusive of their involvement with cancer. So if you would, tell us a bit about where you're from, what you do for work, and what you do for fun when time allows for fun.
Oh, fun. What is that? So yes, as you said, I'm Naniki Seboni. I'm from Johannesburg, but more specifically, I'm from a township called Soweto. I'm sure if you've heard of, the apartheid history in South Africa. Soweto is one of those places that is mentioned. So that is where I have been. I was born. This is where I reside now. And this is where I find myself enjoying my early 30s. So I am a cancer survivor. I'm a cancer speaker as well as an awareness facilitator. But outside of the cancer space, I am an actress, radio presenter, and I absolutely love being on stage. So I find it so fitting that my broadcasting background has now led me to a platform where I can use my story to share and educate more people. So I think I've been trained pretty okay for this cancer space. And outside of that, if I'm trying to have a little bit of fun in this crazy world of ours, I enjoy hiking, which can be quite tricky when you're a melanoma survivor. But I just thoroughly enjoy being in the great outdoors because it's always been something that I've loved doing. So anything that requires me to be outside, I'm there.
Wonderful. It's wonderful what you're doing and wonderful what you will be doing, both present and future, to help in the battle against cancer with your advocacy and your awareness. Now, in terms of your cancer journey, all of us who are cancer survivors had that point, that juncture in which we noticed that something wasn't quite right, something was wrong. For you, what was that juncture and how did it manifest itself?
I think for me, there were many points where I should have acted. It wasn't just one specific point, because my first mole developed when I was 7 years old. And then my second mole developed when I was 20 years old. So there were different points in my life when I should have been proactive, but we can blame the 7-year-old self to being a child. And, being 20 years old, we could also blame that on, I guess, the naivety of my youth. So I think when I did eventually act on my health in that space, it was because I was seeing a neurologist and she was about to discharge me, and I guess something inside of me said she needs to have a look at my mole, because I didn't know that there was another doctor who, in this instance, a dermatologist, would be able to actually, pinpoint exactly what was wrong with my mole. So my neurologist then became the one who took a beat, in fact, on my behalf and said, I need to get you to the dermatologist ASAP. So it wasn't really me. I think it was my circumstances at the time and then my doctor pushing forward for it.
Now, we're confident you'll be able to learn some tips and tools from this episode to help you through your personal cancer journey. But first, we'd like to invite you to please give us a like, leave a comment or a review below, and share this story with your friends. Kindly click on the subscribe button below and click on the bell icon so you'll be notified when we release our next cancer interview. And if you or a loved one are facing a cancer diagnosis, please click on the link in the description and show notes below to check out our free guide, The Top 10 Things I Wish I Knew When I First Got Cancer. And for you, Naniki, when you first got cancer, let's please pick up the story from the point in which you were referred to a dermatologist. What happened then?
So I get referred to the dermatologist, and I've never been in a space like this before. I noticed that there's all types of charts around, the office, the doctor's rooms, skin this, skin that, but nothing in my mind is telling me that what I'm about to go into could be one of these charts that I'm seeing on the wall. So the doctor sees me, and he, obviously checks my entire body, but more specifically, he checks where the mole is. So the mole was located on the lateral side of my left leg. So he just checked it, and he was a bit somber about it. And because this is a teaching hospital, he had his students there surrounding him, and he was asking them questions. And I'm just sitting there like, what is this? What is going on? What are these terms? And eventually he just tries to explain to me that we're going to remove them all. It looks quite suspicious for him, and they're going to perform a biopsy, and I would have to return in the next couple of weeks to get those results. And I don't want to lie to you, Bruce. I was so nonchalant about everything. I just thought, oh, finally, that horrific mole that has been causing me so much pain and embarrassment is finally off my leg. And I was glad for that, but I didn't think it was anything serious. I didn't think I'd be coming back to hear that my life would change so drastically with a melanoma diagnosis.
And this diagnosis, the day that you learn of that diagnosis, for any of us who have gone through cancer, quite obviously, it's never a good day, but each of us is different in how we receive this news, how we deal with it, our persona, our makeup. You said you were nonchalant, but eventually it had to sink in that you had cancer. In your specific case, how difficult was that?
That was extremely difficult. I'll tell you, if I take just one step back into it, I was back at the hospital for another checkup, and I'd gone in the specific date that they told me to come in. My results were not ready. And again, didn't think much of it. So when I went in, I think a week and a half later for a different appointment, I went past them. It was like, oh, it's a Friday. I'm like, oh, it's a Friday. I'm so relaxed. Let me go in and see if they have my results. And the doctors sat me down, and again, this time I think the somberness, there was a sternness to my doctor. And I think what got me a little bit worried in the moment was the fact that she brought somebody else in. So if it was just her by herself, okay, that's fine, she can give me the results. But the fact that now they were calling in the professor to be the one who then gave me this diagnosis, I knew something was strange, something was off. And they proceeded to tell me that, we did the biopsy. It took a little bit longer because they wanted to make sure, because somebody of my, I guess, genetic makeup wouldn't, have a diagnosis such as this. So they needed to make sure. And the doctor says to me, you have stage 3 malignant melanoma. And obviously, again, medical terms, I had no clue what this was. And I then proceeded to say to them, but what is that? And when they said it's skin cancer, first thing that went to my mind was, but I'm Black. Because in as much as the little knowledge I had about skin cancer, I knew it was associated with white people. I've never heard of a Black person being diagnosed with skin cancer. And let alone now they're telling me that I have melanoma. My whole life changed. When they tried to explain to me, I guess, the severity of what melanoma was, I went into a daze. I can't remember not one word they said to me, because apparently in that moment, they told me what the melanoma was, what causes melanoma, how they now, had to diagnose it for me, what forms of treatment would be available for me, and I spaced out. And I think it's such an unfortunate thing in the moment, because I'm sure they were giving me really important information, but I just couldn't grapple with the thought of me having cancer, number one, and then skin cancer, number two. And then now you're telling me it's the deadliest form of skin cancer. I couldn't. I really could not come to terms with that diagnosis. And everything that happened after, the diagnosis was just downhill from there.
This sounds kind of strange to say this, but we have interviewed melanoma survivors who had moles in parts of their body that they couldn't see, like on their back, in a place like under their arm that they never looked. Has it ever occurred to you that as bad as all this was, it could have been worse had it been in a place that you weren't even aware of?
Not even at all, because I still didn't understand what melanoma was. I still didn't understand what skin cancer could have meant to me, as a person of color. So I wasn't even thinking about whether this was a good or a bad thing that it was on my legs or back of my neck or anywhere like that. So no, that wasn't a thought at all.
So you had briefly talked about treatment options, and different types of cancer present different treatment options to those who are diagnosed. In other words, I'm a survivor of prostate cancer, and prostate cancer, people who are men who are diagnosed with it have all manner of treatment options they can do. But what about melanoma? Did you have treatment options, or is there only one way to go?
There are treatment options that are available, but for me, I didn't have any chemotherapy. I didn't have radiation. I didn't have immunotherapy. All I had was a surgical intervention, and whoop, just like that, my cancer was gone. That, to this day, I was even having that conversation with my mother today, that I still can't believe my luck with that, because I guess my understanding of cancer at the time, and I think still a lot of people still generally have this idea that if you go through cancer, you will most definitely experience chemotherapy. And that wasn't the case for me. And I guess even as I continue to grow in the cancer space and even grow in the melanoma community, I still find that I'm still a bit of a rarity. With not having the chemos and the radiations and the immunotherapies, because a lot of the people who also went through melanoma had many other options within their treatment. So I don't know why my only option was surgery, but I'm certainly glad it was, because I don't think I was mentally prepared for, or even psychologically prepared for, the effects that chemotherapy would have, done to me.
The surgical intervention, it's still from a distance, it still doesn't sound like something easy to go through on your part. It sounds like it could have been difficult or painful or both. But if you look back on the surgical intervention for you, what was the toughest part?
The toughest part about this whole thing, Bruce, even as I say to you that, there's the physical aspects of, what chemo can do to a person. But because at the time of my diagnosis, I was still mourning the death of my father, I was going to therapy, and emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, I was in just the worst place of my life. So when the diagnosis came, from diagnosis to treatment, it took me 6 months. And the reason why this was a 6-month journey was because I couldn't come to terms with it. More than anything, facing my own mortality at the age of 24, I felt like it was just better for me to die. I didn't think that any part of me would be able to go through cancer treatment by any means of the imagination. And for those 6 months, I was living a lie. I was wearing a mask every single day. I had to go to work. Every day I had to speak to my mother. Whenever I had a doctor's appointment, I would get in my car. I thought I was ready. And halfway through, I'd get on the highway and go back home and just curl up in a ball and cry my heart out. I couldn't understand what cancer was. I still couldn't understand what that was going to mean for me and my body and, my career at the time. And another thing about chemo that I guess a lot of people are also afraid of is just, the aspect of losing one's hair. And I thought, I don't want to lose my black girl hair. Oh no, I could lose everything else, but not my hair, so the entire time I was battling with my mental state.
And in a situation like that, it would really help if you got some kind of support. Looking back at sources of support through this very difficult time, what are some of the persons or entities that came to your aid?
At the time, because again, we were still trying to understand what the cancer in itself was going to mean for me. I couldn't really speak to my mother. She was still in shock. I was still in shock. My partner was still in shock, but he was going right into Google this, Google that. All this information came up, and this is how we're going to deal with this. And he's telling me about all these holistic ways that we can deal with this thing, and it wasn't working. And then I remember it was a Friday morning, Bruce, and I was having one of those mornings when I just couldn't get out of bed. And I remember having to pray and really try to gather myself. And in this prayer, I said to God, I'm like, help me with this. I don't know how to cope with this diagnosis. And I remember it just so deeply in my heart. And I almost heard a voice that said, get in contact with cancer. So strange. So strange. And I got up from the floor, and I took my phone and I got in contact with the Cancer Association of South Africa. And literally on this Friday, my life was saved by this organization, because the support I got from this complete group of strangers was more than anything that I had received in the 6 months from diagnosis to then eventually treatment. And what I found was that, they led me to a Facebook support group called the Champions of Hope. And the people in that group were so amazing, encouraging me to go in. And remember, this was the Friday. And on the Monday, I went in straight into the hospital because I didn't want to let all those people down. I finally felt like I had a reason to champion and fight this cancer head on. And on that Monday, I promise you, I was ready to rock and roll with this cancer. And I would have never been able to do that without the support from the Cancer Association of South Africa.
If you would, tell our audience about some of the things that cancer, C-A-N-S-A, tell us some of the things that cancer can do for them if somebody might find themselves in the position that you were in and they would need the same kind of help that you got. What are some of the things that cancer can do?
The great thing about being diagnosed back in 2015 and now in 2023, oh my goodness, so much time has passed, is that, a lot of the resources have been updated. So now they have a free telecounseling line for people, in South Africa that they can call and get that one-on-one support via telephone. I didn't have that at the time. All I had to do was maybe go on their website or something like that. So right now, patients, loved ones, caregivers, anybody that's looking to even support their loved ones who've been diagnosed can call this telecounseling line and speak to somebody who can walk them through, having patient navigators to walk them through the journey of cancer, because that's what I needed at the time. I needed to understand from A up to Z, what would this journey mean? And they are fortunate right now that they can have a resource like that from the Cancer Association of South Africa, aka Cancer. We call it Cancer. And another thing as well is the support group, as I mentioned. And we have events that we do, like the Cancer Relay, the Cancer Shave-a-thon. The Shave-a-thon is really a powerful thing in our country. I really believe with all of my heart that, anybody that may be touched by cancer, either through a loved one or anybody that has long hair and feels like they would love to give back to, especially a cancer patient, they can donate their hair. And the Shave-a-thon takes that hair and, that donated hair, and takes it to what's this lady? Her name is Rani, and she takes those bundles of hair and she creates wigs for cancer patients. So there's so many resources where people can find strength and knowledge and be able to find a community for themselves so that they don't feel like they are alone the same way that I had felt before.
And if anybody would like to contact the Cancer Association of South Africa, the web address for its site is cancer, that's cansa.org.za. cancer.org.za. Our guest is Naniki Seboni of Johannesburg, South Africa. And she is a survivor of melanoma, and we're happy to have her tell us all about her story. Now, at some point, Naniki, things had to change for the better. Things got better, and if you would share with us that that trajectory, how things got better, and what that was like, and how you felt about it.
When things got better, it almost felt so surreal because I had been living in quite a depressive state for such a long time that I remember even the day that the doctors declared me, just in remission, technically in remission, and said to me, look, we removed all of the cancer and, doesn't have a chance to spread. I thought, there must be something else to this. It can't be that easy. And that still took me a little bit to come to terms with. But I think that the moment when I realized that things were looking up is when I had, the Cancer Association of South Africa reached back to me and said, how was your treatment going? How are you? And they shared my story on the website. And with that, I knew I was okay. I knew I was on the road to great things to come. I knew I was on the road to recovery, not just for my physical body, but for my mental health as well. And from that, almost like a snowball effect of things just, happened. People calling me to share your story because it's such an anomaly. And yes, and now this newspaper, this radio station, I'm just like, wait a minute, is my story impactful to some people? And then I got to really take it all in, Bruce. And I realized that in the space that I was in the melanoma community, even to this day, I'm still the only black person there. So I know that with my story, I get to impact the majority of the population of my country, people who still have, a belief that skin cancer is a white person disease. I stand up and I say, we also can be impacted by this disease. Yes, we may have maybe the darker skin, but that doesn't mean you are immune. So I found that sharing my story and really being vulnerable about my fears, especially, that people then started to connect with my story and started to connect with just who I was as a person, and then finding this victory over cancer was just the cherry on top.
Excellent. Naniki, we're going to start to wrap up now, but I want to hear the answer to this question in your words, because I think I know the answer to it before I ask. But again, I'd like to hear how you would answer this, how you would articulate this. But if you could reach out to anybody listening or viewing and articulate the importance of being seen by a dermatologist, how would you state that? In what words?
Ultimately, I believe that each and every single person needs to have access to medical care, first and foremost. And in my country, that's not always the case. You find that your closest hospital is some 400 kilometers away. So there's a need first for people to have access to medical care. And with that, then comes understanding what each doctor then does. So when we get to the point where you're seeing a dermatologist, that's a specialized doctor. And the power of seeing somebody like a dermatologist is that the skin is the largest organ of our body. And we may not always be so concerned about it because we feel like it's there, it's protecting us, it's keeping all of the gooey parts inside, it's keeping everything together, but we don't necessarily pay too much attention to it. So if there was ever a word that I would say to people is that, know your body. Nobody knows your body better than you do. You know when there's a new lesion, a new mole, a scar, a scab, and keep track of it. That's what I did initially before I even understood what was going on with my body. I was tracking the evolution of my mole, and that helped me afterwards. And I knew that even when I went to my dermatologist and I was able to show them how my skin kept changing, my mole was evolving, that they also felt empowered in that matter. So know your body, have self-checks, and really just be open if you're finding something new on your skin, because that could be the difference between a life-saving procedure or you just being ignorant.
And we certainly prefer the former to the latter as far as that goes. Naniki.
Absolutely.
Okay, Naniki, we're going to wrap things up now. We're going to conclude this episode, but we want to thank you for taking the time to talk with us, sharing your story, both past and present, and we know that there is a future to it because you're going to continue to get the word out about the importance of getting checked and get the word out about your story and how it has evolved in a very good way. So again, Naniki Seboni of Johannesburg, thanks very much for being with us on Cancer Interviews.
Thank you so much, Bruce. I appreciate it.
And we want to remind you, as we do at the conclusion of each episode, that if you are going through a cancer interview or a loved one is, that you are not alone. There are people out there just like Naniki who have things to say that can help you. And when they speak, Naniki speaks, you should listen. So until next time, we'll see you on down the road.